Hello everyone, my name is Dr. Susan Blank and I'm an endocrinologist who works with the Virginia Department of Health. Welcome back to the fourth and final nutrition session for the Virginia Healthy Heart Ambassador Blood Pressure Self-Monitoring Program. Today our topic is healthy eating for life. So far in this series, we focused primarily on how to eat in ways that can lower blood pressure. But today we're going to broaden out the discussion and talk a little bit about how to eat in ways that will lower not just blood pressure, but other cardiovascular risk factors as well. Just as with the previous videos, there are going to be times when I suggest pausing the video to have a group discussion and then returning to the video when you're ready. Let's get started. Today, we're going to start by discussing the relationship between nutrition and cardiovascular risk factors. We're going to move on to talk about how to reduce saturated and trans fats and added sugars in our diets. Then we're going to talk about some vitamins and minerals that are important for heart health. And we're going to finish up by talking about healthy snacking and how to make healthy choices while eating out. Let's start by discussing the relationship between nutrition and cardiovascular risk factors. Cardiovascular risk factors are things that increase our risk for heart disease and stroke, and they come in a few different categories. They can be medical conditions, including high blood pressure, high cholesterol, diabetes, and obesity. They can be lifestyle factors, including diets that are high in saturated fat and sodium, lack of physical activity, high alcohol intake, and smoking. And they can be demographic factors like age, race and ethnicity, and genetics and family history. And one important thing to note about these cardiovascular risk factors is that while the ones on the right are out of our control, the ones over on the left in the medical conditions and lifestyle categories can be controlled to some extent. And I think this is great news because it means that we can do things that will positively impact our heart health. We're going to stop for a minute to have a little discussion. What I would like you to do is to look through these risk factors and try to identify which ones are related to nutrition and what people eat. And for the ones that you identify, I would like you to think through for a minute and see if you can come up with any dietary changes that could potentially help limit or even eliminate the risk factor. Go ahead and pause the video now. Welcome back. I hope you were able to have a good discussion and identify the risk factors that are related to nutrition, which include high blood pressure, high cholesterol, diabetes, obesity, and diets that are high in saturated fats and sodium. Now we're going to move on and talk about ways to eat that can reduce or even eliminate these risk factors. Eating for a healthy heart is a key factor in the fight to prevent cardiovascular disease, and there are several key features of heart-healthy diets. They include limiting sodium, limiting saturated and trans fats, limiting added sugars, and also eating a high-fiber diet. Some of these features are more important for some risk factors than others. For example, limiting sodium is especially important to lower blood pressure. Limiting saturated and trans fats is especially important to lowering cholesterol levels. And limiting added sugars is especially important to preventing or managing diabetes. However, there's a lot of interaction and overlap between these features, and in order to have the maximum impact on heart health, it's important to eat a diet that incorporates all four of these key features. And we've actually already discussed a dietary approach, the DASH diet, that does this. We're going to start off with a quick review on reducing sodium. 9 out of 10 Americans get too much sodium in their diet, which increases their risk for high blood pressure, heart disease, and stroke. The recommended limit for sodium is 2,300 milligrams for all Americans and 1,500 milligrams for people who are at higher risk of heart disease. And remember, 2,300 milligrams of sodium is the equivalent of about 1 teaspoon of salt, and 1,500 milligrams is under 3/4 of a teaspoon of salt. And that's not just salt that you're adding from your salt shaker, it's all the salt that you're getting in the foods that you're eating throughout the day. And to complicate things, we also learned that over 75% of sodium intake comes from processed and restaurant foods. That's why it's really important to try to eat more whole, unprocessed foods like fruits and vegetables, and also to try to cook more at home when you can. When you cook, you have control over how much sodium you're putting into your food. As we're going to learn later in this session, it's quite common for restaurant meals to have more than the total daily recommended intake of sodium in just one meal. When you are eating processed and restaurant foods, it's important to read nutrition labels and try to choose lower sodium options. And it's also a good idea to try to limit salty foods that are included in the American Heart Association Salty 6. These include things like rolls and bread, cured meats, canned soups, sandwiches, pizza, and burritos and tacos. Now we're going to talk about reducing unhealthy fats. Fats get a bad rap, but they're actually essential for our bodies to function normally. Fats give our bodies energy and support cell growth. They protect our organs and keep us warm. They help our bodies absorb nutrients and produce important hormones, and they provide essential fatty acids that our bodies cannot make themselves. However, some dietary fats are healthier than others. In order to understand the effects of different types of fats on the body, it's important to understand a little bit about blood lipids. And blood lipids are the fats that circulate in our bloodstream. These are commonly measured as part of routine blood work in something called a lipid panel. So some of these terms may sound familiar if you've talked about your lipid panels with your doctor before. This can be a complicated area, but for the purpose of this discussion, we're going to focus on three main components of blood lipids, and those are the LDL cholesterol, the HDL cholesterol, and the triglycerides. So let's start with the LDL cholesterol. LDL cholesterol is sometimes called the bad cholesterol. Its job is to transport cholesterol from the liver to cells throughout the body. The problem is that if there's too much LDL, it can build up in artery walls, creating plaque that can constrict blood flow and lead to heart attacks and strokes. And we can see this in this diagram here. The tube that you see here is a blood vessel. The little red dots that you see represent red blood cells, and ideally you'd want these to flow freely through the blood vessel. But unfortunately, in this case, we can see this yellow buildup in the walls of the arteries that's made up of LDL and plaque. And you can see here that they've narrowed the artery and restricted the blood flow. So not as much blood flow as we'd like is coming through there, which can lead to things like chest pain. And what we really worry about is the narrowing can get so narrow that it can either close off entirely itself, or a little clot can form there and close off and block the blood flow entirely. And if that happens, that's when you get a heart attack or a stroke. So the goal for LDL is to have it be lower. So lower is better for LDL, and you can remember that because both lower and LDL start with an L. As far as the HDL cholesterol, this is sometimes called the good cholesterol, and the job of the HDL is to transport cholesterol from the body back to the liver for removal. So for HDL, we want it to be higher. So higher is better for HDL. Both higher and HDL start with an H, which can help you remember that. Then the third component is triglycerides. Triglycerides are a storage form for excess energy. It travels through the blood, but can also be stored in fat cells. And lower is also better for triglycerides. To summarize the effect of the blood lipids on heart disease risk, if LDL goes up, HDL goes down, or triglycerides go up, that increases the risk of heart disease. On the other hand, if LDL goes down, HDL goes up, or triglycerides go down, that decreases the risk of heart disease. Now we're going to walk through the different types of fats, and we're going to start with trans fat and hydrogenated oils. These are ones that you want to avoid altogether. They are found in fried food, packaged baked goods, and other highly processed foods, and they raise that bad LDL cholesterol and are consistently associated with an increased risk of heart disease. These were largely banned in the United States in 2021, which makes them easier to avoid, but small amounts can still sneak into the food supply. One way they can do this is in processed foods. Each serving of processed foods has to have very minimal trans fats, which is fine if you're just eating one serving, but if you're eating a lot of servings of processed foods over the course of the day, that can add up. The other place that we can see them is in fried restaurant foods, and we'll see that a little bit later. The next type of fat is saturated fats, and this is a type of fat that we would like to try to limit. So saturated fats are found in fatty meats, full-fat dairy, and tropical cooking oils like coconut oil and palm oil that are found frequently in commercially baked goods and other highly processed foods. And one tip-off that something is a saturated fat is that it tends to be solid at room temperature. Saturated fats raise the bad LDL cholesterol, and they also increase the risk of heart disease. So again, this is something that we would like to limit, and the dietary recommendations for Americans recommend that we keep to under 20 grams of saturated fat a day. The third type of fat is the unsaturated fats, which include both polyunsaturated and monounsaturated fats. And these are fats that are considered healthy, and so you would want to eat them in place of the other types of fats. These types of fats are found in fish, nuts, seeds, soybean-based products like tofu and edamame, and also plant oils, including olive oil and canola oil. And one tip-off that a plant oil is high in unsaturated fats is that it is liquid and not solid at room temperature. These unsaturated fats lower the bad LDL cholesterol. They also lower triglycerides and overall risk of heart disease. And they provide essential fats that your body needs but can't make itself. And one of these that you may have heard about is omega-3 fatty acids, which is found in fatty fish, and is part of the reason why the American Heart Association recommends that you eat 2 servings of fish a week. If you don't like fish, omega-3s can also be found in walnuts and in some plant oils, including soybean oil and canola oil. One important thing to note about fats is that even healthy fats are calorie dense. Fats are the most calorie dense of all the macronutrients. All fats have 9 calories per gram in them versus 4 calories per gram for proteins and carbohydrates. So healthy fats can be a great source of energy, but you still need to be mindful about portion size. One heart healthy strategy is to try to replace some saturated fats in your diet with unsaturated fats. For example, instead of having fatty meats like red meats, you could try having some fatty fish like salmon or mackerel, trout, sardines. Instead of using solid fats like butter, shortening, and lard, you could switch to liquid plant oils like olive oil and canola oil. Instead of eating chips, if you want a crunchy snack, you can have nuts. And instead of having cream cheese on a piece of toast or bagel, you could switch to nut butter or avocado. Now we're going to move on and talk about added sugars. Added sugars are sugars that are added to food during preparation and processing. These provide energy in the form of calories, but no additional nutritional value, which is why they're sometimes called empty calories. This is distinct from naturally occurring sugars like that found in fruit and dairy products, which come packaged with other healthy nutrients. For example, if you eat a piece of fruit, you get the natural sugars in there, but you also get fiber and a bunch of different vitamins and minerals that provide additional health benefits. Added sugars have a number of health consequences. They are associated with weight gain and obesity, increased risk of insulin resistance and type 2 diabetes, and also increased risk of heart disease. Added sugars are listed on nutrition labels in their own line. However, they're listed on the nutrition label in grams, which I think is very hard to wrap your mind around. So one good rule of thumb is that 4 grams of sugar is the equivalent to 1 teaspoon of sugar. So what I do when I look at a nutrition label and look at the added sugar line, I take whatever number that is, and then I divide it by 4, and that gives me an idea of how many teaspoons of sugar are in a serving of that product. The American Heart Association recommends that men limit their added sugars to no more than 9 teaspoons a day or 36 grams, and that women limit their added sugars to no more than 6 teaspoons or 25 grams a day. And Americans are far exceeding that. The average American is currently taking in 17 teaspoons of added sugars a day. As you might expect, the leading sources of added sugar are sugar-sweetened beverages, desserts, and sweet snacks. A single 12-ounce can of soda or fancy coffee can have more than the recommended daily intake of added sugars. A typical 12-ounce soda has around 10 teaspoons of sugar, and a fancy latte can be in that same ballpark. Added sugars are also found in a large variety of processed foods, including some that are marketed as healthy. Common sources include flavored yogurts, breakfast cereals, granola and protein bars, dried and canned fruits. Dried fruits are often soaked in a sugar solution before they're dried, and the canned fruits that are stored in syrups instead of 100% juice can also be very high in added sugars. Pasta sauces can actually have a lot of added sugar in them, as can ketchup. 1 tablespoon of ketchup tends to have around 1 teaspoon of sugar in it. So it's really important with the processed foods that you look at the label and particularly that added sugar line to assess how much sugar is in the food. There are a number of things that you can do to reduce the added sugars in your diet. First, eat more whole, unprocessed foods. If you're eating an apple or a carrot, you know you're not getting any added sugars. When you do eat processed foods, pay attention to that added sugars line on the nutrition label and choose the lower sugar options. Rethink your drink. You don't want to drink a ton of calories and sugar every day. One thing that you can do is make water your go-to drink. If water by itself is too boring for you, you can put in some lemon slices. Some people like to put in cucumber, mint. You can play around with it and figure out what's more appealing to you. Also, when you have coffee, choose black coffee over fancy coffee drinks. Even if you add some sugar or sweetener to it, at least you'll be in control over how much you're putting in. A lot of American breakfast foods are very high in sugar, so you can try switching to a savory breakfast like a vegetable omelet or a piece of whole wheat toast with some peanut butter or avocado on it. And lastly, if you're craving something sweet, try having some fruit. It can satisfy the sweet tooth because it has those natural sugars in it, but with the sugar, you'll be getting some healthy fiber and vitamins and minerals. Increasing dietary fiber also has a lot of benefits for heart health. Fiber is a complex carbohydrate that does not get absorbed by the body, and it has a whole host of benefits. These include helping to decrease LDL cholesterol, which is a bad cholesterol, as well as triglycerides by binding to and eliminating cholesterol from the body. It can decrease blood sugar spikes by slowing down digestion and the absorption of sugars into the bloodstream. It can help with weight management by making us feel more full, and it also can lead to healthier gut bacteria and improved bowel regularity. And it's found in a bunch of different whole foods, including whole grains, fruits, vegetables, beans, nuts, and seeds. There are also a number of vitamins and minerals that are important for optimal heart and blood vessel function, as well as maintaining a normal heart rhythm. These include B vitamins, which are found in fish, poultry, dairy, eggs, and leafy greens. Vitamin D, which our bodies can make themselves using sunlight, but can also be contained in fortified milk and orange juice and fatty fish. Vitamin E, which can be found in nuts, seeds, and plant oils. Calcium, which is found in dairy products and leafy greens. Magnesium, which can be found in dark leafy greens, whole grains, and beans. And potassium, which is found in high levels in bananas, citrus fruit, potatoes, and tomatoes. The recommendation for all of these is that you get them through a healthy, well-balanced diet rather than supplements, unless supplements are recommended by your doctor because of a specific deficiency or medical condition. I do want to spend an extra moment talking specifically about potassium because it has an important role to play in blood pressure management. Potassium reduces the effects of sodium because the more potassium we eat, the more sodium is excreted through the urine. It also relaxes the blood vessel walls and in that way can directly help reduce blood pressure. The recommended intake of potassium is between 2,600 and 4,700 milligrams per day, and the ratio of potassium to sodium is also really important. So the best thing that we can do for blood pressure management and heart health is to increase our potassium intake while at the same time decreasing our sodium intake. Potassium is found in a wide variety of fruits and vegetables. Some of the best sources include bananas, citrus fruit, tomatoes, potatoes, and cooked broccoli and spinach. It's also found in dairy and meat products. You can also consider switching from regular salt to potassium-enhanced low-sodium salt substitutes. This can be a good way to decrease your sodium intake while slightly bumping up your potassium intake. One important word of caution, however, excess potassium is removed through the kidneys, and potassium can be more difficult to remove as we age, if there's decreased kidney function, and with certain medications. So before you attempt to increase your potassium intake, and especially before you include any of the potassium-enhanced low-sodium salt substitutes in your diet, you want to consult with a healthcare provider. To bring things full circle, you may have already realized that the DASH approach to eating, which we talked about during our first session, incorporates all the heart-healthy eating principles that we've been talking about during this session. As you remember, the DASH approach to eating emphasizes eating more of vegetables, fruits, whole grains, fat-free and low-fat dairy, fish, skinless poultry, beans, nuts and seeds, and vegetable oils, and limiting the intake of fatty meats, full-fat dairy, sugar-sweetened beverages, sweets, and sodium intake, with a recommendation to limit sodium to under 2,300 milligrams for everybody and under 1,500 milligrams for people at higher risk for heart disease. So as you will notice, this is a diet that emphasizes eating a lot of nutritious foods from a variety of food groups. It limits the intake of processed foods, and it is naturally low in sodium, saturated fats, and added sugars, and high in fiber, potassium, and other heart-healthy vitamins and minerals. Now we're going to move on and talk about heart-healthy snacks and eating out. It's important to make heart-healthy choices, not just when you're eating meals, but also when you're snacking. And it's a good idea to stock your house with heart-healthy snacks so they'll be an easy, available go-to option when you do get hungry. And this slide lays out some great options. If you're craving something crunchy, fruit like apples and pears are a great option. Vegetables, including celery, carrots, bell pepper, and broccoli. Unsalted nuts and air-popped popcorn. With the nuts, you just want to be a little bit careful because they are higher in fat, that you're watching the portion size. If you're craving something sweet, fresh fruit is always a great option. You can also try canned fruit that's in 100% fruit juice. Frozen bananas and grapes can be good if you're craving something not just sweet but also cold. Low-fat, unsweetened yogurt with fruit or a little bit of honey, and also dark chocolate. If you really want something chewy, unsalted sunflower seeds are a good option. Also unsweetened dried fruit or low-fat cheese. And when you're thirsty, the first thing that you should reach for should always be water, but you can also have low-fat milk, small amounts of 100% fruit juice, or low-sodium tomato or vegetable juice. Even though cooking at home is generally healthier because we have a lot more control over the ingredients that we put in our food, realistically, a lot of us go out fairly often for a variety of reasons. Eating out can be convenient, social, celebratory, so it's important for us to understand that restaurant food tends to be high in sodium, fat, sugar, and calories, and to prepare accordingly by understanding what's on the menu and what to look for. So one thing that you can do is consider looking up the menu online in advance. That'll give you more time to look over it and figure out what the healthier options are. You can check the menu for items that are marked as healthy and also look at the nutrition information if it's available. It's generally not available for small or individual restaurants, but will be available for the larger chains either on the menu directly or through online resources. Read the food descriptions on the menus carefully and you can get clues from the descriptions. If foods are described as fried, au gratin, crispy, scalloped, pan-fried, sautéed, buttered, creamed, or stuffed, they're often high in fat and calories. If foods are described as being blackened or prepared with rubs, those are often high in salt. Descriptions that tend to lead to healthier options are foods that are described as being steamed, broiled, baked, grilled, poached, or roasted. So those are ones that you want to look for and choose. And if you're not sure based on the menu description how a meal is prepared or what ingredients it contains, you can always ask your server. It's also important to make informed food choices and be selective. Avoid extras like bread and butter, chips and salsa, appetizers, and cocktails. Make water your go-to drink. Be selective at salad bars and when ordering salads. It's easy to feel like you're doing something healthy by ordering a salad, but end up with something that has as much salt and fat as other options if you're not careful. So choose fresh greens, raw vegetables, fresh fruit, beans, and low-fat dressings, and avoid cheeses, cured meats, croutons, marinated salads, and pasta salads. And also you can ask if healthy substitutions, modifications, or smaller portions are possible. For example, if a dish comes with French fries or onion rings, you can ask to have a vegetable on the side or a side salad. You can also ask for dressings, sauces, and gravies to be served on the side so you can control how much you're actually eating of those. And if the portions are large at a restaurant, you can either share with somebody else you're eating with or ask for half of the food to be wrapped to go even before it's brought to the table to help manage portion size. Now we're going to walk through some meal options at popular restaurants, and we're going to start with McDonald's. So the first meal option would be a bacon quarter pounder with cheese meal, which comes with fries and a soft drink. This comes in at 1,795 milligrams of sodium, which is higher than the 1,500 milligram recommendation for people who are at higher risk for heart disease. It has 17 grams of saturated fat, which is close to the recommendation of keeping it under 20 grams of saturated fat per day. It has some of that bad trans fat in it at 1.5 grams, and it has a whopping 75 grams of added sugar, which is almost 19 teaspoons of sugar. The majority of that is coming from the soda, but a little bit of it is also coming from the bun and probably from some condiments on the burger. And the total calories are 1,220 calories. If we want to look for something that's healthier, we could start by choosing the Daily Double Burger. This is a slightly smaller burger. It doesn't have bacon on it, and it does have some tomato and lettuce on it, which can provide a little bit of extra vegetable intake and fiber. We're going to swap out the fries for their apple slices, and instead of having the soda, we're going to have water. This brings the sodium down to 810 milligrams, which is a significant improvement. It cuts the saturated fat down to 11 grams, trans fat down to 1 gram. The added sugars are way lower at 3 grams, and it comes in at 505 calories. And if we want to take it a step further, we can swap out the burger for the filet of fish sandwich. Fish is a more heart-healthy protein than the beef. This cuts the sodium down to 580 milligrams, the saturated fat down to just 4 grams, 0 trans fat in this option. The added sugars are 4 grams, and the calories are 395. At Popeye's Fried Chicken, a popular menu item, it's a 2-piece classic signature chicken combo, which comes with 2 pieces of fried chicken. In this case, the nutrition information listed is for getting a breast and a leg. It also comes with a biscuit, Cajun fries, and a soft drink. This comes in at 2,780 milligrams of sodium, which is twice the recommended limit of 1,500 milligrams for people at higher risk for heart disease. The saturated fat is 23 grams, which is over the recommended daily limit of 20 grams a day. Trans fats are 2 grams, total sugar is 67 grams, which is close to 17 teaspoons of sugar, and the total calories is 1,260. So if we want to go for something a little bit more heart healthy, we could choose the 6-piece classic boneless wings with coleslaw and water to drink instead of the soda. The sodium in this is still pretty high at 1,560 milligrams, but a lot better than with a 2-piece combo. The saturated fat is also down slightly to 18 grams. Trans fats are still 2 grams. The total sugars are down to just 10 grams, with the majority of that now coming from the coleslaw, and the calories are down to 620 calories. I also looked for a grilled option because grilling meat is generally lower in fat than frying it. However, Popeye's grilled version is a blackened version, and as we talked about, blackened proteins often are high in salt, which that one was. Just the chicken by itself had 1,700 milligrams of sodium in it, which made it a less heart-healthy choice. We're going to move on now to a more sit-down option with Applebee's, and we're going to start with the Bourbon Street chicken and sausage penne pasta. This comes in at a whopping 3,640 milligrams of sodium, which is more than twice that 1,500 milligrams recommendation per day. It has more than twice of the recommended allowance for saturated fat at 46 grams. It also includes 2 grams of those bad trans fats, 12 grams of total sugars, and around 1,400 calories. If we're looking for a more heart-healthy option here, we could pick the grilled chicken with steamed broccoli and mashed potatoes. There are a couple buzzwords in this description that would lead us to believe that it might be healthier. The chicken is grilled and the broccoli is steamed. Both grilled and steamed tend to be healthier ways of preparing food. This has quite a bit lower sodium at 1,750 milligrams, although it's still high overall. The saturated fat is also down considerably at just 8 grams. Trans fats are down at 0.5 grams. 5 grams of added sugar, and 550 calories. So I think looking at these restaurant options highlights a few different things. The first is that many restaurant meals are very high in saturated fat, added sugars, and especially sodium. But if you look carefully through the menu and expend a little effort, you can generally find meal options that are at least healthier, even if they might not be as healthy as what you'd made at home. I think one thing to really look out for that was highlighted again by these examples is that sodium especially can be very difficult to avoid if you're eating out. Now I want you to put some of what you've learned into action by trying to make these typical restaurant orders more heart healthy. So I'm going to go through a couple typical orders, then I'm going to ask you to pause the video and have a group discussion and try to figure out what you could do to make them more heart healthy. The first order is lunch at a sandwich shop. The usual order is a ham and cheese sub with mayonnaise and mustard, chips on the side, and lemonade to drink. The second order is a pizza night out where you usually order thick crust pepperoni pizza and a soda to drink. So go ahead and pause the video now and have a group discussion. Try to come up with a few ways for each of these that you can make them more heart healthy. I'll see you in a few minutes. Welcome back. I hope you were able to have a good discussion and come up with some good ideas. Some of the things that I came up with at the sandwich shop, one thing would be to switch out the ham for some grilled chicken if that's available. You could see if they have low-fat cheese or maybe skip the cheese altogether or substitute some of the meat and cheese for some vegetable options like tomatoes, lettuce, cucumber, and sprouts. You could ask them to go light on the mayonnaise and mustard, or even better, you could have that on the side so that you can have control over how much of that you put on. Instead of the chips, you could get a side salad. If you wanted to go a step farther, you could maybe even have a larger salad and only have half a sandwich. And then for the lemonade, I would substitute water. And then for the pizza night, one thing that you could do would be to switch the thick crust pizza for a thin crust pizza. You could ask them to go light on the cheese. You could swap out the pepperoni for vegetable toppings like peppers and mushrooms and onions. And again, I would swap the soda out for water. Let's finish up with a group discussion about some of the things that we've talked about today. Let's start by thinking about snacking. What are some of your favorite snacks to eat? What are some swaps that you could make that would make your snacks more heart healthy? What are some things that you could do to set yourself up for success with more healthy snacking? Then let's think about dining out. What are some of your favorite restaurants or places to eat outside of the home? How could you prepare to dine out? What are some ways that you could modify your order to be more heart healthy? Let's stop the video for a minute and then come back and we'll finish things up. Welcome back. Now let's move on and finish the last couple slides. We're going to spend one quick minute talking about physical activity and blood pressure management. As we've discussed before, regular physical activity can lead to a significant reduction in blood pressure and also improve other cardiovascular risk factors. And the recommendation is that people get at least 150 minutes of moderate intensity physical activity each week. And moderate intensity is the equivalent of a brisk walk. This should be a pace at which you can still carry on a conversation, but you wouldn't be able to sing. In addition to traditional aerobic exercise like walking, other forms of exercise, including isometric exercises, combined training, dynamic resistance training, and high-intensity interval training have been shown to lower blood pressure, and isometric exercises like planks and wall sits seem to be particularly effective. You can see these on the right side in the photos. The top one is a demonstration of a plank. The bottom one is a wall sit. These are nice exercises because they're easy to do at home with minimal to no equipment, and you can even do them while you're watching TV. So if you want to give these a try, the goal would be to start by trying to hold the position for 20 seconds at a time, and then gradually try to build that up till you can hold it for 2 minutes, and then gradually build up to where you can do 2 minutes 4 times in a row with breaks in between 3 to 4 times a week. This concludes the nutrition series. Thank you very much for your time and attention, not just today, but over the past 4 sessions. I hope you've learned some helpful information and practical skills that you can bring into your day-to-day life that will help you lower your blood pressure and your overall cardiovascular risk. I wish you all the best in your future health. Thank you.